Welcome to the Money Metals Midweek Memo, news and commentary relating to sound money, the precious metals markets, and the economy. I'm your host, Mike Maharrey. Thanks for tuning in. And now for something completely different. Some of you might get the nod there to Monty Python. And it is going to be a little bit of a different show today. And that is because I am pre-recording this about a week and a half before it's going to air. And the reason that I'm pre-recording is I'm going to make another shot at going on vacation next week. I had planned on going up to Kentucky to see my kids and friends and whatnot a few weeks ago, and good old Hurricane Milton blew our plans all to you-know-what. So we're going to give it a shot again and take a quick trip up to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So wanted to go ahead and make sure that I have a podcast for that week. And in order to do that, I have to record it beforehand. And to make it make sense, I really need to do something that is kind of evergreen. So I decided that I would do an Ask Mike Anything episode. And so I solicited questions on social media, and I got some really, really good questions that we're going to run through here in the show today. Now, this is completely unscripted. Like, I've done absolutely no research or planning. I've copied the questions, and I'm going to run through them just off the top of my head. So, if I say anything dumb, then I apologize ahead of time. Again, I got some great questions, and really so many questions that I'm not going to have time to answer all of them. So we're just going to kind of run through as many as we can. So let's just roll into it here. The first question comes from Heather. And Heather asks, how will the world's shift away from the dollar impact metal markets? And I think that the answer to that question is really kind of going to determine what that shift actually looks like. Like, how does it play out in practice? Do we shift towards a, kind of a multipolar situation where you've got a number of currencies that are kind of serving together as the world reserve, like a basket of currencies, where we have maybe some transactions in euros and some in rupees and whatnot? Or if we evolve to a point where gold and or silver becomes the dominant currency and the dominant money. Obviously, if that were to happen, then the price of gold would have to go up substantially in order to back the world economy. And, I've heard numbers floated anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 an ounce would kind of be the sweet spot for gold as a kind of a global reserve currency. Honestly, I think that the kind of the multipolar situation is probably going to be a more realistic scenario. I think that we're seeing that movement now. We're seeing, like, the BRICS countries, they're talking about, and not only talking about it, they're doing it, transacting in their own currencies and bypassing the dollar. That is kind of what I see evolving, where the dollar becomes less significant in the global monetary system, but not completely irrelevant. And I still think that that's going to have a significant impact on the metals markets, because I think we're going to continue to see central banks accumulating gold. And that's because, when you have all of these different currencies, gold is real money. And gold is a safe store of value, right? You don't have to worry about other governments or all of these different things that can impact the value of our currency. So I could kind of see a scenario where countries are doing transactions in, euros or in yuan or even in dollars. And then they're storing their wealth in gold. And really, that's kind of what we're seeing, right? We're seeing this ramp up of central bank gold reserves. And I think this is just kind of evidence of that. They're looking to store their wealth in a safe, stable money, not fiat. And it's funny because all of these governments, they love their fiat money, right? They thrive on fiat money. The fiat money is really what makes government possible in this day and age. Governments could not borrow and spend to the extent that they do if they had a stable money that couldn't be inflated. This is particularly true of the United States. So I think that as we see de-dollarization, as the world shifts away from the dollar, I think that it is going to be a tailwind for the price of gold, possibly for the price of silver. We recently learned that Russia is planning on not only having gold in its sovereign wealth fund, but also silver. So we could see silver's role as a monetary metal kind of reemerge as we move ahead. But it's really hard to say. But I do think that these are the facts. There is a trend toward de-dollarization. The dollar's role is diminishing in the global economy. There are a lot of countries that want to minimize their dependence on the dollar because the United States has abused its privilege as the issuer of the world reserve currency. And I think that this is going to be a positive for precious metals because, again, gold is real money. It's been money for 5,000 years. And I think everybody in the world trusts it, right? You may not take yuan from me, right? You may not take rupees from me. You're certainly not going to take a Zimbabwe dollar from me, right? But you're going to take gold. I don't care where you are in the world, what country, everybody recognizes gold. So I think that it's going to be a headwind as we move forward. Next question is from Mikey, and he asks, what is the best way to end the Fed? What a great question. I can say this with absolute certainty. I don't think Congress is ever going to end the Fed, right? I don't think you're ever going to see a political movement in the highest levels of American politics to get rid of the central bank. As I've already mentioned, the government depends on the central bank's ability to inflate and manipulate the money supply. I've said this before. The Federal Reserve is the engine that drives the biggest, most powerful, most expensive government in the history of the world. Without the Federal Reserve, putting its big fat thumb on the bond market, enabling the borrowing and spending, you wouldn't have the government that you have today. So I'm all for ending the Fed, but you're not going to see it happen from, at least I don't think so, from a political movement. That's not to say it couldn't happen. I think the biggest threat to the Federal Reserve is true currency competition, right? We all know that fiat dollars are worthless and becoming more and more worthless. We see the inflation. We see the money printing. We see the fiscal irresponsibility of the U.S. government as it borrows and spends. So we know that the dollar is a problem, and we know that the Fed is a problem. You bring currency competition in and allow real money to gain a foothold, whether it's gold, silver, crypto, something else, all of the above. There's this thing in monetary theory called Gresham's law, and it basically holds that bad money is going to drive out good money. If you have bad money in a system, it's going to circulate and people are going to use it, but they're going to hold on to the good money. So if there's gold and silver, the bad fiat is going to drive the good money out of circulation. So we really saw this when the U.S. government took silver out of the coins. You hardly ever see a pre-1965 dime or quarter anymore because the bad money, the fake money, has driven that out. People hold on to the good money and the silver. But there is some theories out there that holds that you could have a reverse Gresham effect, where the good money actually drives out the bad. People recognize that the fiat is worthless and that it is no way to store your wealth, and then people will start using the good money and basically drive the bad money out of the system. In effect, what we have right now is the Federal Reserve has a monopoly on money. So in order to really end the Fed, whether it's in reality or just in effect, we have to have currency competition. We have to break that monopoly. And I think the way to do this is from a bottom-up strategy. So you start at maybe the state level and create an environment where we can have currency competition to make it easier to use gold and silver in transactions, and try to create that competition to the point that people start using the good money. Ultimately, it's going to come down to human action. There has to be enough people wanting to use good money and then the environment in order for that to actually happen. I think it's a tall order to end the Fed. I mean, the cynical part of me says that the system is going to have to collapse before we can really consider ending the Fed. But I really do think that that's the best strategy, a bottom-up, where individuals start finding ways to use good money in transactions, and also state-level legislation. And this is happening, by the way. There's a great organization, the Sound Money Defense League. You can go to soundmoneydefense.org. And they are really working, my good friend JP, really working hard at the state level to change laws to encourage and incentivize and facilitate the use of sound money. Okay, so now we've got a question from Jason. Would a gold standard help with inflation? Yeah, absolutely. With a true gold standard, assuming that the government adhered to it, right, that they didn't change the peg, there would be no inflation. You can't inflate with a gold standard. That's the whole point, right? You can't print gold. Inflation in a gold standard system is based on the increase of the supply of gold, which is very slow. It's about 1,000 tons a year, something to that effect. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only would it help with inflation, it would end inflation. And this is precisely, again, why governments don't want a gold standard. That's why Nixon severed the final ties to the gold standard, because government cannot borrow and spend to the extent that it does without being able to inflate the money supply. I say this all the time. I think it's important to remember inflation is not a mistake, right? It's not something that the government wants to go away. Inflation is an intentional policy. It's on purpose. It's what they want. They've settled on this 2% inflation target simply because 2% is kind of a level where we'll accept it, right? We don't get too upset with 2% inflation. But you have to think about it. That compounds, right? So in 5 years, you've lost 10% of your purchasing power. Again, this is by design, and a gold standard or simply using gold and silver or silver as currency would eliminate that completely. Darren asks, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Well, Darren, are you talking about an African or a European swallow? Rahant asks, why is the gold-silver ratio 82-1 if it comes out of the ground at 9-1? That's a really good question. So basically, if you're not familiar, the gold-silver ratio is basically how many ounces of silver it takes to buy an ounce of gold. So if you say the gold-silver ratio is 82-1, that means it takes 82 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. In the modern era, that ratio on average has kind of been between 40-1 and 60-1. So this 82-1 that we're seeing today is extremely high, and it indicates that silver is underpriced compared to gold. The ratio used to be much closer when silver was more used as a monetary metal. The thing about silver that it makes it very difficult to kind of wrap your head around the market is there's so many factors, because while silver is fundamentally a monetary metal and it tends to track with gold over time, it is also an industrial commodity. About 50 to 60% of silver demand comes from industry and technology. So it's a commodity, but it's also money. And so because of this, you're going to have a wider spread than just what comes out of the ground. And this is basic economics, right? If I have 10 mud pies to one regular pie, right? That doesn't really tell you anything because they're different things and they're different values. Gold and silver are kind of different things. And so that's why you see this ratio, just because the amount of, what I'm trying to say is the amount of something, right? The fact that you get more silver out of the ground than gold at a 9-to-1 ratio doesn't necessarily mean, even in all things being equal, that the two things are equated at that ratio, right? It's kind of hard I'm having a hard time explaining what exactly I'm trying to say. But the point I'm trying to make is that the sheer number of something doesn't necessarily determine its value. Gold is considered more valuable just on the basis of other things besides its relationship to silver, if that makes sense. But the important thing to understand about the gold-silver ratio is that right now it is extremely high, that generally the ratio tends to snap back to that mean of 40-to-1 to 60-to-1. And I think that's going to happen, which really is kind of a bullish indicator for silver, meaning that there's a lot of upside, that at some point you're probably going to see that ratio contract back down closer to the historical average. John asks, in IRA vehicles in metal. So what he's talking about is you can hold gold and silver in your IRA as part of your investment portfolio within that IRA and get the tax advantages that come with having an IRA. John asks, do you hold the physical metals? And if not, how do you know you can gain access when the fan gets clogged with manure? And the quick answer to that is no, you cannot hold the metals at home. If you have precious metals in an IRA, the IRS requires that the physical metal be held in a secure IRS-approved depository. Money Metals has a depository. We just opened a brand new facility. It's one of the largest in the West. We call it the Fort Knox of the West. And Money Metals does store your metal. It is audited. It is segmented. All of the security is in place. So if you have your metals in an IRA, it has to be in a depository like that. And, how do you know you can access your metal if the poop hits the fan? Well, the honest answer is you don't, right? When you have outside storage, you're always introducing counterparty risk. And that's why it's very important to store your metals in a trusted facility. Do your research. Find a facility that you can trust that the metal's there, that you can access it. Obviously, if you have a complete meltdown in the economy, you're not going to be able to access that metal in all likelihood. And that's why I think you should diversify the way you hold your metals. I think it's great to hold metal in your IRA portfolio. It creates a more balanced portfolio, just like, in your normal portfolio, you want to have precious metals, you want to have stocks, you want to have bonds, you want to have a balanced portfolio that helps diversify your risks. I think when it comes to your deployment of metals in your investment strategy, you do want to hold some physical metal in your direct possession. If you can, if you feel confident that you have a good storage situation in your home or somewhere where you have access, you can get your hands on that metal, you should have some of that. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to also have metal stored in a depository. I don't want to store $100,000 worth of gold in my house, right? There is a benefit to security. So I think maybe you might want to do both, and it just depends on your risk tolerance. I'm not planning my investment strategy isn't wholly predicated on a financial meltdown or a breakdown of society. That is in my head. There are things that you should do to hedge that risk, but also, a lot of my investment strategy is assuming that things are going to go on somewhat normal. And by normal, I mean the dollar is going to continue to devalue and the government's going to continue to hose us. But so that's the answer to the question. I mean, you don't know that you can gain access, but I think if you find a trusted depository, I think that your risk is going to be as low as you can possibly make it. I mean, there's risk to holding metal in your house, right? Again, if you have a bunch of metal, a bunch of gold and silver in your home, I don't care how good your safe is, how good your hiding place is, thieves can get to it. So you just have to figure out, again, your own risk tolerances and your own kind of the way you look at things, because as I always say, value is subjective, and kind of make those decisions based on that. My good friend Alan managed to get sports ball and gold and silver into a single question. Alan said, since 2021, a number of professional athletes have taken a portion of their salaries in Bitcoin. Have any taken salary in precious metals? If they had, would they be ahead today over their peers? The honest answer is, I don't know if anybody has ever taken salary in precious metals. I've never heard of it. I don't know that anybody has, but I can't definitively say they haven't. That said, it would be a great idea. I mean, yeah, you know what? Pay me in gold all day. Pay me in silver all day. And they absolutely would be ahead of their peers because gold and silver hold their value over time, especially gold. I did a whole show a while back about how, in fact, gold is an inflation hedge. Now, obviously, you can find some points. Well, actually, right now, you really can't find any points in the past that you're not going to be ahead of inflation if you bought gold. Recently, we actually broke the record for the real price of gold. Not by real price, I mean the inflation-adjusted price. Before that, it was in 1980, and we just eclipsed that. So even if you bought gold at its high in 1980, adjusted for inflation, you're now ahead of the game. But generally, especially in the 21st century, if you bought gold any point in the 21st century, you are ahead of inflation. So an athlete who got paid in gold, $1 million in gold as opposed to the guy that got $1 million in fiat paper, the guy with the gold has retained his wealth. And honestly, at this point, gold is even ahead of inflation. So you're actually making money on that investment. So if you have the opportunity, absolutely figure out a way to get paid in gold and silver. John asks, how much wood can a woodchuck chuck? Well, John, a woodchuck can chuck as much wood as a woodchuck can chuck. Andrew asks, what is the process the bullion banks use to smash silver prices? Who wins and who loses? Are there any leading indicators that suppression is about to occur? Whoo, Andrew, you want to open up a big can of worms. And I'm going to be honest, this is not really in my wheelhouse. I do know that there is some manipulation in the bullion markets by using paper gold and paper silver, particularly in silver. The silver market is much easier to kind of manipulate in that way. Folks who know a whole lot more about this than I do tell me that it's becoming more and more difficult for the comics and the paper metal people to manipulate prices, and that they feel like the actual market dynamics are starting to catch up with the manipulation. But again, this isn't really something that I'm comfortable of delving into. I think, I can tell you who wins. The winners are going to be the people who can suppress the prices. It's the big banks. It's the 1%ers, right? It's the people who have control of the situation. But As far as indicators that suppression is about to occur, I think it has been occurring, but we're rapidly approaching a place where that can no longer be the case. At least, again, that's what folks who are much more knowledgeable. There's a great organization called GATA, the Gold Antitrust Action League, and you can follow them. They do really good work on kind of this manipulation that we can sometimes see in the markets. Nelson asks, what even is hockey anyway? Dude, hockey is the greatest sport ever. I mean, it's as simple as that. And here's my encouragement to you folks. If you've never been to a hockey game, go. Get an opportunity. I don't care if it's minor league hockey, NHL, go to a hockey game. I would almost bet money that you're going to enjoy it if you tend to like sports at all. My daughter, who's on sports, went to a hockey game with me, absolutely loved it. It is exciting. The bad thing about hockey is it doesn't translate very well to television. So if you've watched hockey on TV and you thought, this is boring, no, go to a game. But yeah, hockey, best sport ever. Brandon asks, are we experiencing the beginning stages of hyperinflation? And he went on and he said, I heard that our oppressors' debt, government debt, increased by $500 billion over the last 3 weeks. And look at their interest payments. And he's right. Interest payments are were over $1 trillion in fiscal 2024. First time that's ever happened. So yes, absolutely, we are in a financial mess. I call it monetary malfeasance. That's what the Federal Reserve and the government are engaged in every single day. Now, are we in the beginning stages of hyperinflation? I'm inclined to say no. And the reason that I say no is because the dollar is still the dominant world currency. That role is diminishing. As I talked about with Heather's question, it's going to continue to diminish. But I personally don't see a situation where the dollar is suddenly not the reserve currency anymore. I feel like this is more of a slow burn, a slow degradation, and that it's going to happen over time, not like a crash and a currency crisis. Now, I could be wrong. The saying is things happen slowly and then all at once. So yes, it's highly possible that, something could happen, economic warfare where the dollar is actually kicked off its perch. I think if that ever happens, yes, you're going to get hyperinflation. I think the situation we are in now is we're just going to see high inflation, right? Not hyperinflation like where your notes become worthless and you start using dollar bills as napkins, but a situation where year after year, we're seeing the depreciation of the dollar, seeing rising prices. I mean, we're in that now, right? We've seen it in the wake of the COVID. Price inflation has slowed down a bit, but it's still out there. Just recently, last week, the Fed got its favorite inflation indicator. It's called the PCE, and the core PCE was up 0.3% and is still running at 2.7%. So that's taking out food and energy. A lot of the decreases in prices that we've seen over the last 6 or 8 months has been a fall in energy prices. Gasoline prices are way down. Oil prices are down. So that's driving that CPI lower, even as core inflation is still hot, which is telling you that the monetary inflation that is causing prices to go up is still going on. And in fact, we know that the Fed has pivoted back to easy money. We're seeing an increase in the money supply again, which is inflation. So I think that we're going to get a lot of inflation. I don't know that we're going to get in hyperinflation up until the point where we really see the dollar lose that reserve status. Now, if that ever happens, yes, we'll get hyperinflation because nobody will want dollars anymore, right? Right now, the world needs dollars. It uses dollars to transact business. And so everybody wants to have dollars, and then they take those dollars and they park them in U.S. debt. That is really, more than anything, has what allowed the U.S. government to run up the massive debt that it has. Because the world needs dollars, it facilitates and props up the borrowing and spending machine. As that erodes away, you're going to continue to see an uptick in inflation. Less demand for dollars means the dollar devalues. So I personally am not a believer that hyperinflation is around the corner, but I do think that you should be prepared for and aware of that we're going to get high doses of inflation, I think, from now to eternity. All right, I think I've got time to answer one more question. This one comes from my friend Chris. Chris is a fellow hockey player, by the way, so he can tell you how great hockey is. He asked, can we repair this system, or does it all need to be torn down and set ablaze? What a fantastic question. I tend to be pretty black-pilled. I don't think that we can fix this system. We have $35.7 or $8 trillion in debt. That's never going to be repaid. We have a system of government that is out of control, where we have a constitutional system where government was supposed to be limited, and now it's grown to where it's virtually all powerful. And I just don't think that you can just fix it, right? People ask me all the time about elections and stuff. I think trying to fix D.C., to fix Washington, D.C., is a lost cause. I mean, the system is broken. You don't fix it by changing out the driver, right? If you have a broken down car, you're not going to fix it by getting a new driver. The car is still broken down. That's kind of how I view the system. I don't think we're going to have to do anything to tear it down or set it ablaze. I think it's going to fall down by itself. I mean, that's kind of how I see, the trajectory of the future. I think that this system, as we know it, is going to collapse under its own weight. We are going to have, at some point, severe economic distress. It's going to be difficult and it's going to be painful. But if the powers that be, if we can figure out a way to implement a better system on top of the wreckage, I think we'll be fine. The one thing that I'm optimistic about, and again, I tend to be pretty black-pilled and not the most optimistic person in the world, but the thing that I am optimistic about is that Americans are generally great people. We make stuff, we have technology, we have high levels of education, we're resilient. I look at, having just gone through a natural disaster, I look at how quickly folks have managed to start to rebuild. Pretty phenomenal. And it's not because the government came riding in. Most of it was done without the government at all. Most of it is just neighbors helping neighbors. I was amazed, the day after the hurricane, everybody in my neighborhood was out helping each other, patch roofs and cut down tree branches and just generally being good, decent people. I think that when we can get away from politics, that rises to the top. So in the event, let's say the dollar crashes, the U.S. economy just collapses, the monetary system, right? What's really important is, can you make stuff? Can you produce stuff? The money is, in the financial system and the politics, it's kind of a framework to facilitate that. But ultimately, if you've got people who can make stuff, who can think, who can build, then you're going to be okay. I think the United States could recover relatively quickly from an economic crisis if the government doesn't jump in and muck things up even worse. Unfortunately, that's what government tends to do. I guess to answer the question, no, I don't think we can repair this system. I think we can. I think our time is better served figuring out ways to disconnect ourselves from the system as much as possible, to build alternative systems, to build community, get to know your neighbors, do things that make you more independent and less dependent on the system itself, because the system is broken and it's going to fall apart. And then when it does fall down, those networks that we develop can become the building blocks for something new and better in the future. And again, I'm optimistic in the sense that I think people can do that. I'm confident in people's ability to come together and build and fix. I'm not confident in government's ability to do much of anything because when politics gets involved, it is poison. And that's kind of where we are today. So I had several more questions actually on the list, but I'm running out of time. And hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I generally script these podcasts pretty carefully. And this is the first time I've done one here where I just basically talked off the top of my head. So hopefully everything that I said made sense. I know I got a little rambly when I was talking about the gold-silver ratio. So, but you know, you get a little bit of the more natural Mike here, right? So that's it. I do want to say this, virtually everything that I've talked about, it kind of dovetails into the fact that we have a collapsing currency, right? We have a depreciating dollar. And the solution to that is to have real money. Whether you're holding it in your own safe, whether you're holding it in a trusted storage facility, you need to have real money. You need to have gold and silver. And this is a great time to call. 800-800-1865. Talk to a Money Metals precious metals specialist, and you can talk to them. You can figure out how gold and silver will fit into your investment strategy, into your portfolio, how it can help preserve your wealth. These folks are fantastic, and they'll help you answer questions that you may have. If you don't want to talk to anybody, you can just go to moneymetals.com. You can actually chat with a precious metals specialist online, or if you know what you want to buy some silver eagles, you want to buy some gold eagles, you can just do it right there at moneymetals.com. So do that today, because pretty much all of the answers to every question today lead you to the point that, hey, I need real money, I need gold and silver. So that is a wrap for this episode of the Money Metals Midweek Memo. You can get more information about everything that I've talked about on the show and more over at moneymetals.com/news. And if you want to get the latest news and information relating to gold and silver right in your inbox, make sure you sign up and get on our email list. Of course, you can subscribe to the Midweek Memo on your favorite podcasting platform. And when you do, you'll be able to also tune in to our Market Wrap podcast every Friday, where you're going to get a quick 10 or 15 minute overview of the week in precious metals, along with conversations between yours truly and other interesting people from the world of gold, silver, investing, economics, politics, etc. As always, I very much appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to listen to the show. I know there's a lot of stuff out there to listen to, a lot of stuff vying for your time, and it means a lot to me that you choose to spend a little bit of time with me. So thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will be back next week with a more normal show. Thank you.